I'm Darrell
Hello.
Parrish Bakeman, and I am coming to you from wonderful, sunny Arizona, the southern part of Arizona in the city of Tucson, and most importantly, the legislative district number 17. And we are happy that you tuned into our YouTube channel today. I am very honored to have our candidate for the state house as my guest. His name is Kevin Volk. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Darrell. How are you?
I am really ecstatic and so happy that you could take time out of your very busy campaigning schedule to talk with me today. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
Of course, it is getting busy, but always have time for LD17 and
Uh,
for you.
I'm really happy. Kevin has already knocked on my door, at least the door that I used to live in. So he's a real serious candidate. That's impressive. He didn't come with anybody else. He came by himself. That tells you a lot about him. So now that I said that, Kevin, tell us about yourself. Let us get to know you.
Yes. So I was born just outside of the city of Tucson and raised there. Proud to grow up here and be native born. Went to excellent public schools for elementary and middle school in that area, just in the kind of foothills of the Catalina Mountains, which are the anchor of this district. We've got the northwest portion where you are and the southeast portion where I am, and we're divided by the mountain range. And so I grew up kind of right in the middle area. Had amazing, fully funded public schools, which were incredible, created the foundation of all my opportunities later in life. Then followed family tradition to go to South Point Catholic High School in central Tucson. My dad and his 7 brothers and sisters had all gone there, as had my 2 older cousins. So it was pretty well established path, and that was great as well. When I graduated, I wanted to expand my horizons and went to college in the Northeast at Brown University, majored in economics, and then was trying to figure out what to do and felt the call of service. And this was 2008, the election of President Obama. And yes, and joined Teach for America, which was placing folks in underserved schools around the country, and was lucky enough to be placed in the Bay Area next to my grandfather where he lives, and taught as a 5th grade teacher there in East San Jose, California. Just incredible opportunity, and learned just how unlimited the potential of our kids truly is. Every single student of mine had just unlimited potential. And the only question really was what kind of system of opportunities that we set up for them as adults. And, would they get access to all of the opportunities imaginable, like I was lucky enough to have growing up, or would they have obstacles and barriers placed in their way? So that really crystallized not only my understanding of, how I grew up and how fortunate I was, but just how many folks don't get access to all those opportunities, and what a difference that could be, and how much potential we're really talking about when we talk about education and crafting a society that lifts everybody up. So from there, spent some time in Mexico as an English teaching assistant in the Fulbright Scholarship Program, which was a great perspective. I'd gotten the idea from Representative Gabby Giffords of Tucson, and I had done an internship with her at her DC office doing constituent communication in Southern Arizona, which is still one of the tightest, most competitive congressional races in the entire country. So that was the summer of cap and trade and healthcare reform. So a very, at the time, what was then politically divisive summer of a lot of debate and a lot of passion on both sides. So that was, unique perspective in a divided politically divided area and talking with constituents, and serving under a true public servant, Representative Gabby Giffords, who is the real deal and managed to be a representative with grace and class and compassion. And
Right.
so when I was looking for when I told her that I wanted to have the experience of living abroad, she said, "Well, why don't you look into what I did and have someone help you, cover your living costs, maybe like a Fulbright." And so I did, and I copied her and I did a Fulbright as she had done in Mexico. Um, when I came back, another experience I really wanted to have was to work in politics in a full time capacity. I've really come to believe strongly in the impact of elected officials in our American system of government between, the collective impact between local, county, state, federal, and president. Those decisions really govern how we live in America. And so I really believe strongly in that. I wanted to work with someone amazing on the in the same category as Gabby Giffords. And so I ended up working for Tim Kaine, who was the former governor of Virginia, and then worked for his US Senate campaign in 2012, which was, at the time, Virginia was the top battleground state in the entire country. It had been reliably red, turning purple, very, very similar to Arizona today. Worked for his campaign. We were successful. Another wonderful experience. And then after that, finally came back home. I've lived in all sorts of different places in my life, but Tucson and Southern Arizona were always home. Came back and started working for something of a family business as a commercial real estate agent, working with my dad, representing small, medium-sized businesses, representing properties with vacant spaces, putting deals together, working with a lot of folks who constitute the local economy here in Southern Arizona, and then also got involved in volunteering, especially with children's charities and some other community leadership programs, and then started to get concerned about housing affordability. So started doing some investments and redevelopments of properties for more affordable housing, which continues to this day, and until I became a candidate for this office. So that's the real quick bio.
It makes you seem like you're as old as me, and you know how old I am. My goodness, you've done a lot. I mean, you went to school, you went away to college, and then you went on a Fulbright scholarship. You worked for a politician in Virginia. You worked out of the country, and you worked in your family business, and you've been helping people everywhere along the way. And most importantly, you started out by being a public servant who is a teacher. Some of the best public servants we have are those that work with our young children.
Absolutely.
I think that helps to form who you really become or are by just being able to see children and help them where they are. Thank you for sharing your resume, which is so impressive. I'm really impressed by it, and I do think for someone as young as you are, you've accomplished an awful lot, Kevin. We're glad to say that you're the candidate for the state house in LD 17. We're delighted to have you in that position, and you are doing the work that needs to be done. So let's talk a little bit about how all of that helped to form you, the candidate who's going to the state house, and how this has formed your heart, how it helps you to see public service. Can you share that with us, please?
Yes. So it starts off with my childhood. I had an incredible childhood. And like I said, I had access to every opportunity. So I think that for me, my story starts with having that be my understanding of the world. And then the story of my life from there is expanding my perspective and horizons and having more experiences outside um, of that childhood experience I had. So even going to South Point, which is a private high school, it was in Central Tucson, and it does have a robust financial aid program. So I went from a pocket up in the foothills area of the Tucson metro, which is more affluent, to central Tucson, and people would come from all over to attend Southwind, including come from Mexico. We had a number of students who were Mexican nationals, and that broadened my perspective a little bit. Being in school with kids from all over the metro area, um, some of whom were on financial aid, some of whom were whose families were paying the tuition. So that widened the perspective a little bit. Made a very conscious decision to widen my perspective when I went to college in a different part of the country and got a different perspective. Also, Brown is known for a public service ethos and a desire to change the world and do good things. And so it's always, those are my people, people who are interested in the really important things in life and making society better. And so I think, I had these parallel forces of both expanding my own horizons and learning more about other people's experiences outside of my own, and then really gravitating towards people and places where public service was being done. And then deciding to teach and teaching in an area in a school where 100% of the kids qualified for free or reduced price lunches was a new demographic and a new experience for me, and seeing just how different some of the family situations were, some of the neighborhoods were from where I grew up, but how the thing that was the same was the potential. And there's a lot of assumptions that get made about kids in communities like this, but I came away with not only the belief, but the knowledge. I know this to be true from experience, that no matter where a kid is from, no matter what they look like, no matter what their home situation is, they have unlimited potential. And I could see that potential, and I could see the lack of opportunities or the wide range of opportunities relative to my own experience. And living in Mexico was another place to broaden my horizons and perspective. So I think it's broadening perspective and realizing, hey, not everyone grows up the same. And some people grow up with far more access to opportunities. And to me, the question that I never got a satisfactory answer to was, why do some people get access to some opportunities, especially as children, and others don't? And the answer is there's no good reason, but it's because of the way our systems are set up. And how are our systems set up? Well, that's decided by our elected officials. So there's very important work that nonprofits and community groups and private sector folks do to help form our society. But a bulk of those key decisions are made by elected officials. And so that's really informed my focus, whether it's as a volunteer for Kathy Giffords back in the 2000s, or as an intern or a staffer now as a candidate, the focus on elected office as something where really important decisions are made that control who gets access to what opportunities in our country.
I think that's a full circle experience that you've had, Kevin, to be able to have seen things and experienced things and now want to do things that are going to help the greater good. That's an important.
Mhm.
I have one quick question. Are you multilingual?
I can speak Spanish. My peak was in 2010 and 2011 when I was living in Mexico, and I joke that it's getting worse every day from a lack of practice, but I can still speak conversational Spanish.
I think if you live in El Pueblo, you need to speak Spanish, and that's good to know.
Sometimes I do get the opportunity to
Very
practice.
good. Yes, indeed. So let's get into some of this. Let's talk about education, because that's kind of where you started your career. And that seems to be an important issue this year for a lot of reasons. Let's talk about why it's an important issue for you.
I think education is the most natural place to expand opportunities and make sure that everyone gets all the opportunities possible. It is a community institution. It's a source for learning. I taught when I taught fifth grade. I taught at Cesar Chavez Elementary School, and one of his quotes was, "You cannot uneducate the man who has learned to read." You can take a lot of things from people, but that is the most foundational education, knowledge, the confidence that comes with it, and the doors that education opens. So I'm one of those people that believes if we get education right, it will solve all of our societal problems down the road. Um, it's also, I'm a business person, I'm an economics major. It's also the best return uh, on investment for our taxpayer dollars. So it's not only the right thing to do from a moral perspective, it's what we owe our kids, is to give them the best education. That means fully funding our schools. That means fully paying our teachers what they deserve. It's not only the morally right thing to do, but it also makes the most sense. It makes sense to make sure that people are on the right track and equipped with everything and have the opportunities to become really productive citizens. And it makes sense to have a well-educated workforce that's going to attract companies to want to be in a place like Arizona and Southern Arizona.
Well,
So
this is an important issue to me too. In fact, the preceding interview that I had was with Save Our Schools, and Nikki in the cottage gave some amazing statistics about how our state is on a rush to the bottom. Of the 50 states, we're number 49, and primarily because we do not properly fund education. And she gave some important information about why we don't. And there are two reasons. I don't know. I just finished talking with John McClain, who's our candidate for the Senate, and we talked a little bit about this. And the two issues are, number one, the universal voucher program, and number two, the flat tax that was enacted by the preceding governor. Both of those things have contributed specifically to the decline in funding of education, both public education, community colleges, and higher education. Can you speak to that, seeing that this is one of your major issues?
yes, well, there's also a legacy of underinvestment in education in Arizona. There have been, um, the biggest was a lawsuit against the state for literally not just subjectively saying we're getting too little funding, but literally the schools were being underfunded. And there were deals made to resolve that, that ended up in schools receiving far less money, teachers receiving far less money. So this is the most recent, but it's not the first. It's a uh, long-standing, almost tradition, unfortunately, in Arizona state level government to dramatically underfund our schools. And we are 49th. The report came out relatively recently.
Well,
And the budget impacts from the elimination of the tax on the wealthiest Arizonans. It
flat
it,
tax.
it wasn't really. Yes. So I think of a flat tax as going from, let's say you're in Arizona, you have a 2.5% income tax on everybody. And then for those who make $250,000 or more, you have a 4.5% tax on that marginal earnings. To me, a flat tax is when you flatten.
Oh,
But what happened was they just eliminated the 4.5% tax. So I think of it really as an elimination, or a tax deduction for the wealthiest, um, a marginal tax elimination for the wealthiest, technically. But so that's a loss of revenue. And then you have the ESA voucher program, and they're competing for many of the same dollars that the public schools rely on. Public schools are held to curriculum standards, they're held to child safety standards. For example, I am a licensed real estate agent in the state of Arizona, which means I have a fingerprint card on file with the Department of Public Safety in our state. You do not have to have that if you're a private tutor or coach and you receive ESA voucher money in Arizona right now. that hopefully will be changed very soon. There's also no financial transparency. So we don't know the very specifics, but it's a huge impact. And public schools also have to accept everybody. They have to transport people. They have to worry about a lot of logistics. And the ESA voucher money is going into more or less a black hole, at least a gray box or black box where we're not seeing what's happening, and that is a truly existential threat to a lot of our educational system. So we've been long underfunded, but now this is a new set of spending that we really have to look at and better understand. And the first step is really get some transparency around it.
I think that's critically important. Like I said, I'm very against all these so-called wild schemes that people come up with without any background information on the impact that it really has on people. And for sure, the universal voucher program and also the elimination of the upper level of taxes and calling it a flat tax is another part of it. And I think some people think it sounds good because then I can hold on to more of my money. But people who do and say that don't realize that for government to be effective and do the work that it's set up to do, it has to have the financial resources to be able to do that. And usually that comes from taxes and fees. And why people in one breath, you know, don't want to fund government, but yet complain about it. I don't understand that. It's always been a misnomer to me. So hopefully you'll go there and make wise decisions, Kevin Volk.
Yeah, we have to. Unfortunately, we're in this situation where we had a $1.4 billion deficit this year that the legislature had to scramble to address. So a big part of why I'm running is seeing us go from a large surplus to a large deficit because of because of elimination of revenue and then introduction of brand new spending, both on large scale. So I think it is, wise spending is a primary responsibility of the state legislature, and a big reason I got motivated to run.
That's a good thing. I'm glad a former educator is going to do that work. One other thing is the reproductive rights issue. Can we chat about that a little bit? Yesterday was the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision that took away the 50-year precedent of having a woman have the right to choose if she wanted to have an abortion or not, and creating a lot of chaos all over the land. Can we speak to some of your involvement and your point of view on this particular subject matter?
Yeah, this is another place where Arizonans have been really disappointed by the extreme policymaking of some elected officials. And it's another area where we as a state have become kind of national and international news for the wrong reasons. So prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned by the Dobbs decision, the Arizona state legislature had paved the way for the reinstatement of the 1864 era abortion ban. That was an almost total ban on abortion from before we were a state, which didn't happen until about 60 years later. I mean, this is ancient, archaic law that the state legislative Republicans had all voted to pave the way for. So as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, that started a big question mark in the state of Arizona as to where the status was. And when this Arizona Supreme Court read the state legislature's intention, it was very clear to them that the state legislature intended for the 1864 abortion ban to be in effect. And so that is a truly extreme position. After many votes, all of the Democrats and then finally a couple of Republicans who had changed their vote. This is an election year, and many of those
Little pressure.
those Republicans were in swing districts. But whatever the motivation of those Republicans, they changed their votes and overturned the 1864 abortion ban. My opponents that I'm running against were folks who celebrated the 1864 abortion ban. And I believe that is just an extreme position that is way outside of the mainstream with our district, with Democrats, with independents, with Republicans. I believe that there was a there was a reason Roe v. Wade was settled law for so long, and and it's because people understand that women's right to choose is important. Fetal viability makes a lot of sense beyond that for the health of the mother. People understand and agree with exceptions, and the idea that we're going to go back to policy that's 160 years old is absolutely crazy.
Well, I know you've been knocking on doors getting signatures for the referendum. And last night we were at a celebration of all of the people in this southern part of the state who were successful in generating more volunteer signatures than any other place in the state, especially our wonderful legislative district 17. Very proud
Yes.
of all the hard work that we did. And it looks like tomorrow those petitions are going to the State House to be presented so that we will, in November, have a referendum on the ballot to be able to vote for women to have the right to have an abortion to fetal viability. So I'm excited about that, and I know you are.
Yes. It's exciting. Well, and it's exciting to have the issue be settled again. There's been so much uncertainty and fear and confusion, and it's been
Yes.
devastating not only to women and patients, but also to healthcare providers. The uncertainty is really, really bad for our state. It's even bad from a business perspective. You've got people who are making the decision to potentially move to Arizona to become employees of a company, rethinking that decision,
Right.
or people
Right.
looking at, do I want to continue living here? It's really bad for our state to have this whipsaw back and forth between extreme policy and then the ban gets repealed, but then it might be instated depending on when the state legislature adjourns.
Right.
It's
And
really
crazy.
it's really bad. We need to get back to a place where people have certainty in their rights, and that's
Critical. And we have to send
critical.
people to the State House that don't enjoy creating chaos.
Yes, yes,
Whiplash, whiplash.
yes. And
Really.
frankly, we've seen the state legislature in Arizona be willing to create chaos and be willing to try to overturn the will of the voters when they have spoken. So we will, I believe the initiative will be on the ballot, and then we will see. I believe it will be supported by the majority of Arizonans. And if it is, it needs to be respected as the will of the people and not immediately messed with, as we've seen with other initiatives that have passed by the people.
And there are still people who want people not to vote for it. So this is a request for everyone who's looking at this. Please vote in November for this referendum that's going to give women the right to be able to have an abortion should they need one. I know it's going to pass. I'm sure you have that same belief system too, Kevin. There's another thing I want to talk about because this isn't something that I think many people who happen to be in politics pay as much attention to. And I'm happy that it's one of your issues, and that's the cost of life, of living. We have a tendency, everybody says, oh, my gas is going up. Oh, my blah, 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 blah. We're all always worried about our day-to-day, what's happening, and don't understand how all of that transfers into policies and other things that are done in the state. I'd like you to speak to that because I know it's an issue that's important to you.
Yeah, it's an issue that's really important, and it starts with, I guess, like a lot of things. Reason I'm running, it starts with what you don't do. What you don't do is use your budget to prioritize the people who need it the least.
Say
To
that again, please. Say that again, please. One more time.
What you don't do with your budget is prioritize the people who need it the least. You take those taxpayer dollars and you invest them where they're going to give the highest rate of return. And then that is not necessarily to the wealthiest Arizonans. And that has been seemingly the number one focus of the state legislature in the past couple of years, is how do we give as much taxpayer dollars to the wealthiest Arizonans as possible. So
they'll continue to support my campaign when I run again.
That is not helpful. And I can tell you, I work with a lot of folks in business, and a lot of them, even if they're strongly anti-tax will tell you they weren't even expecting or really asking for that elimination of the 4.5% tax rate. And so, of course, when people get a tax break, they'll take it. But that wasn't something that economists were calling for as necessary. It was really kind of out of left field for a lot of people.
I
So
call it wild schemes.
that has been the focus of the state legislature we
Yep.
currently have, and I think it starts with an um, explicit desire to help people and to help the majority of Arizonans, working class Arizonans, middle class Arizonans. And a lot of that comes down to cost of living. A big component of cost of living is housing. That's an area where I've had experience actually buying and renovating and leasing and managing housing. That, for many people who don't have their mortgage rate locked in, for example, that's the biggest cost of living, and that's where we've gone from an affordable market just a few years ago to a very unaffordable market. And so there's a lot to be done in terms of certainly in terms of some regulations, but also a lot to be done on innovation, new technologies, prefabricated construction that will actually drive down the costs of developing new housing so that housing where it's appropriate can be built more affordably. That means the private market can build it more affordably. That means nonprofits can build more affordably. And that means the rents and the mortgage prices that they can turn around can be lower as well. On things like gas, there's very limited things that can be done from a state legislature, or even from a federal legislative level. But there are things to be done, I believe, on other costs of living that are typical household goods that people are buying on a regular basis. But it's really kind of shifting the mindset away from how do we give taxpayer dollars away to the wealthiest, and how do we make sure that life is as affordable as possible for the bulk of Arizonans who are buying groceries and buying household goods. So I think there's taxes to be looked at on some common household items, potentially reducing those. We're also a state with a lot of agriculture, and I think there's some innovative ways that we can try to bring down the cost of agriculture products and have that lead to lower grocery bills for folks. But it's going to take innovation. It's going to take an understanding of the private market and the economy and how that works. And it's also going to take a perspective that's actually dedicated to helping those people as opposed to just prioritizing the wealthiest above all else.
Well, it sounds to me like you have a heart, a compassionate heart. You're showing your humanity, and I appreciate that. Like I said, you started out as a teacher, so that says a lot about you. But just having the compassion to know that the people at the bottom and the middle are the ones we need to focus on, not the ones at the top. And having that mindset is so critical to being the kind of candidate that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I appreciate you sharing that the way that you did. Are there any issues that we have not covered? I know you started talking about agriculture being more innovative. One of the problems we have is water in this state, and if you're giving it away to Saudi Arabia, it's hard to figure out how to use it more judiciously for agriculture that benefits crops and other things and food that people can benefit from. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Absolutely. That's another full on crisis that we're facing in Arizona because of the lack of serious long term leadership from the state legislature. And that is something we have to deal with. The sooner we deal with it, the less painful it will be. The longer we wait, the more drastic it will be. And I want to represent all people. The folks with the most resources will be able to make it through any kind of shock, including to our water supply. They will be okay. It might be costly and painful, but they're going to be okay. I worry a lot what's going to happen to the folks who are not able to just absorb a significant increase in their water bill. And that's what's going to happen if water starts to get really scarce. So we in Southern Arizona have been true leaders on water conservation and management, but it takes conservation and it takes management. And so we need to really take that ethic. Um, I mean, I grew up walking around the desert. You learn about the beauty of the desert, but also the harsh reality that there are things that can bite you and cacti that can poke you. And there's not a lot of water out there. If you're walking around in the sun for too long, you get thirsty. So the conservation ethic was instilled in me from a young age, and especially around water. And I think we need to take that to the rest of the state. And it doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be painful if we jump on it right away. And it can actually be a way for us to become, I think Arizona should become the leader in water conservation technology in at
Yes.
least the country, if not the world. We can see it only as a challenge, but it's also an incredible opportunity for us to be the epicenter of technology and an industry that's going to be increasingly important in a time of climate change and overall warming. We can be the place that fosters that. We can instill the best practices and we can model those in a way that states all over the country copy and can use to
Yes.
combat their own issues. But we have to jump on it and we have to be proactive and we have to think out of the box and think creatively and approach it from every angle. And we've got to get serious about it. That's the first
Well,
step.
not only are you a person of humanity, but you're also creative and innovative enough to understand that if I'm going to go someplace, I'm not just going to vote on what's put on the table for me. I'm going to help to create things that are going to make things better for everyone, especially the
Mhm.
people at the bottom and the middle, with the support of the people at the top. And I'm so happy
Mhm.
that you spoke like that because I know you're a Democratic candidate, but I know you're a candidate for all of us, not just Democrats. And do you want to talk about that? Because I know you knock on all the doors. You do Democratic doors, but you do other doors too. Do you want
Yes.
to reach out now about that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think that's vitally important. The title is representative, and I
There you
think
go.
that doesn't mean you agree with every constituent. That would be impossible. But I believe you have to do your best to understand what people care about, and you have to listen to people. And I think we've gotten to a place, we see the extremism in the state legislature, and a lot of that is driven by partisanship. And I think that's what we see in the state legislature leadership right now is an example of what we don't want. We don't want increasingly extreme far right policy. We want people who are serious about the solutions that are going to benefit people and who are willing to sit down and work together to get that done. And that's something, growing up in a mixed party household, Democrat, Republican, in my immediate family, extended family, friend group,
Yep.
coworkers. It's always been I've always been around a mixed party group, and that's how I work, and that's how most of us work in our personal and professional lives. We don't go around yelling at people and saying they're the source of all the problems.
Right.
We work together, even if we have different interests. We sit down and we work together, and I think that's important. From a pragmatic perspective, getting things done for the people. If you don't do that, you don't get stuff done for the people. And then what are you there for? But then, in a larger perspective, having that ability to talk to anyone is important to try to start to heal our country from this toxic politics we're experiencing today.
Well, Kevin, I believe you are a person who is the man of the hour to do just that. And
Thank you.
yes, you are the Democratic candidate from LD
Yes.
17, and we want everyone to vote for our Democratic candidate for LD 17. There are a lot of reasons for that, and we just want you to just vote for Kevin. He is the Democratic candidate that can go to Phoenix and can work with the current governor to be able to change policies that will affect all of us. Kevin, I just want to, do you want to say any closing words about this? I think you've laid out your case beautifully, but is there anything you want to leave people who happen to be watching this video today?
I think it can be overwhelming, it can be exhausting, it can be really negative feeling to follow politics today. But our system is one that is comprised of people, and we, as the people, change who is elected all the time. We have the power to make that decision, to implement change at the elected official level. So Arizona is particularly exciting. We've had a number of issues with our state government. We've got a number of crises that we're facing. That's all true. But especially at this district, LD 17, we have the obligation, the responsibility, but also the opportunity to make a really significant change. And so I'm thrilled to be a part of that. And I would encourage everyone to feel as optimistic as they can, because we have a real chance to make significant change this election cycle. So don't lose hope. We got this, and really would love your support.
And so Kevin right now is going to ask you to do what?
Vote for just Kevin.
Vote for it.
So there on the ballot, it says vote for up to 2 people, but I'm the only Democrat, and I think the only person who's committed to putting public service over politics. So please fill in the bubble next to my name, and don't dilute the vote by filling in any other ballot or
There
any
we
other
go.
bubbles. Excuse me.
There you go. That's it. Just Kevin. We're going to
Just
leave it at
Kevin.
that. We just want everyone, we want to thank everyone for watching the LD17 YouTube channel and for listening to our candidate for the Arizona State House, Kevin Volk. We're asking you to vote for just Kevin. And don't forget that you've heard it here, and continue to subscribe to the LD17 YouTube channel. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you, Kevin, for being with us today.
Thanks, Darrell. Amazing.